What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode here on The Remedy. I'm your host, Pastor D. I'm delighted to be with you on this beautiful Saturday. Today, we're going to talk about mental illness and the African and the Caribbean community. So stay tuned because this one is going to be a good one. So, by the way, if you are watching this program for the first time, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like the video and share it with somebody who probably needs to hear what we have to say today. So, without any further ado, let's get started. All right, now welcome once again, everyone, to the Remedy. Markel, I'm so glad you're here because I got beef with you. Now, tell everybody what you said to the chat room earlier today.
No, I'm just concerned about the direction of the show, you know what I mean, and stuff that's going on. Pastor Mondi took his second COVID shot. So I just wanted to make sure we had a backup person just in case he passed out or something like that during the show. So, just want to make sure, not one person's bigger than the show. We just got to make sure that we keep going.
I mean, weird.
So,
it makes sense, Markel. It does make sense that you should always have a contingency plan.
Yeah, we got to cover our bases.
No, but the concern wasn't about the brother. The concern was about
the show.
That's my point. That was my point. I'm like, why are you tormenting me so early in the morning, dude?
No, I mean, I have another brother. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like it's the end of the world. You know?
Oh, okay, all right.
Coming for you today.
Ooh, tell us how you really feel. It's for the love, Markel.
I still love you, cuz.
I appreciate it, cousin Woody. I'm so glad that my mother failed us big time when she gave birth to this one. I remember saying to mom, we have two. It's two of us. It's enough. But she wouldn't listen. But now we see why. But anyway, Markel, we're gonna pretend you are in the show today, but we're gonna ignore you for the most part. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
How's everyone doing?
We're good.
Yeah.
Doing
Good. Anybody needs a little mental break? Yeah.
As always.
Yeah, I need a vacation.
Well, I was talking to Pat this week, and she decided she's gonna send the entire Remedy crew on a little mini vacation to Hawaii for about 3 days. All right.
Oh, yes.
That was news for me, but that's good.
When do I pack?
Well, listen.
Packing.
Well, let's go around the block. Let's introduce everybody. We have Cynthia from South Carolina. That's the first lady, a social worker. Cynthia, welcome to the program. Woody from Miami Beach. I still don't like you right now. We are dealing with the snow. You left New York City and now you're in Miami, just enjoying this, huh?
Yes, I'm enjoying not having to even think about snow or any of that, or having food delivery or any of that stuff. So I'm enjoying my time. But I do have one question. Pat, when you send us to Hawaii, is that including our guest today?
Absolutely.
Monkey, can you answer that since you know telling me that?
You can back there now.
Hey.
And right underneath me, I have this gentleman here. He's known is the coach, Coach Kells. I'm going to be nice to you. I can treat you the way you treat me. Coach Kel from Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. What's happening, Coach?
What's going on, man? What's going on, bro? Everybody, my favorite brother. You know what I'm saying? What's going on?
I see. And we're gonna skip the person in the middle right now for a special reason, but we're gonna go right to our scientists and Patricia Bermudez and what wait, Pat, where are you again?
Oh, I'm home.
No, no, where? At home.
Oh, East Stroudsburg,
In
Pennsylvania.
Strasbourg. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes.
I forgot.
And literally, in contrary to Rudy, literally we had one day this week, which was no, actually Thursday, that we did not see any snowflakes since Sunday.
Mhm.
And we're gonna have some tomorrow.
Well, you might as
So
well
I'm
move,
like on 32 inches
No.
of snow,
you might
and
as well move to
I'm ready.
Michigan. You definitely need to move to Michigan. Don't worry about it. You be fine. Now,
You see that?
Cynthia,
Uh,
would you
send me
please
some.
would you please take this moment to introduce to us the
Sure.
special lady we have in our midst today?
So the special guest, her name is Shanta Jerideau. She's a licensed professional counselor. She's
Hey,
a native New Jersey and currently live in Columbia, South Carolina. She earned a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Benedict College and also earned a Master of Art in Professional Counseling, Clinical Mental Health at South University. Over the past 8 years, she have gained experience ranging from homelessness services to inpatient rehabilitation and most recently, private practice. Her specialties include grief counseling, depression, anxiety, trauma, and couple family therapy. So it is my pleasure to present you, Shanta Jerideau.
yay! Welcome, 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 Doc. Welcome, Shanta. It's nice to have you. Next to your face, Woody, I have this big disclaimer before we even begin. And the disclaimer is simply this: that the content of this show is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical what's the other word? Advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So in other words, we're gonna share with you what we believe it's accurate. We're gonna share with you what we think you need to do. But at the end of the day, please consult with your doctor, your physician. Let them give you the proper diagnosis. All right. So mental illness. We have a special. Let me take that big sign from your face, Woody. Yeah, it's this one gotta go. All right, here we go. All right. So first of all, I just want to say it gives me it gives me the chills, simply because one of the questions I know we're gonna ask is people usually say, well, there's not enough people like us in that field. And today, not only we have someone like us, but she's brilliant on top of it. So I'm really excited, really happy to have you, Dr. Chantal, to our show. We're gonna talk about mental illness. And so I guess for me personally, all I have to say is none of us sitting here can say we are exempt to any type of mental illness. We either have experience with it, whether it's personally or we know someone who have dealt with it, or maybe it's a family member or friend. But nevertheless, we are all exposed. We all know somebody who's fighting with mental illness. I guess it will make sense for me as we start this discussion to kind of have you, if you don't mind, give us a little description of what mental illness is. Because sometimes, for me, I remember I was having this conversation with my wife, and we were talking about mental illness, and she made a point that was very significant, and I wanted to bring it to the show. Like, if I'm having a bad day, I'm just having a bad day. Doesn't necessarily means if on that particular day I happen to snap, it's because I have mental illness. Is that correct? Yeah. So she wanted to make sure that this part, that was accurate enough that sometimes we do have bad days. And doesn't necessarily mean because you're having a bad day and you did this or you did that, it means that you have a mental illness. But once that bad day become days and days and days, then we're looking at something different. So how would you describe mental illness?
So what you described is perfect as far as changes in emotions, right? We have emotions that it's natural. We have it from birth, right? If you have children, you know that we see our kids at different ages displaying emotion and understanding it. So if I can be transparent, I have a 4 and a 2-year-old that are kind of small. And my 2-year-old is course she's going through the tantruming, right? She's going through those phases where she is displaying emotion or sadness. My 4-year-old is learning what anger is, and so he's displaying emotion and he's learning how to control it, and have what we would call self-regulation, excuse me. But mental illness is just simply changes in your emotions, your thinking, and your behavior over time, right? And if those emotions and changes impact your social, work, or family activities, that's when we would start to characterize it as possibly a mental illness. So what you just described is definitely something that I think we all experience.
Guys, at any given time, please feel free to jump in. So I guess what I wanted to ask then, when we talk about mental illness in our community,
Mm.
um, the moment that you mention the word mental illness, I see people saying crazy. You must be crazy, or black people don't go to see a therapist. Or we hear, or I'll just pray about it. Um, is there a danger and thinking that way when it comes to dealing with what's really happening in here?
Absolutely. There's a few things and a few ways I could approach that question. When you talk about prayer, right? Because I'm a believer as well. I do believe that we should pray about the problems and circumstances that come, right? Because I think that we don't fight against, or I believe that we don't fight against just flesh and blood, right? So a lot of what we experience is spiritual as well. But what I do think is important is to understand that, God sent therapists, right? As well as doctors. He's given us this gift to use to help people. So it's not just prayer, but He sent us here for a reason, I believe. And so I do think that it is dangerous to look at circumstances as just okay, just pray about it, because some things are overwhelming for people. I talk to people every day, and sometimes they just need someone to talk to, right? It may not be a chronic disorder where they may need medication or rehabilitation or to even seek hospitalization, but it's something they just need to talk about. And I guess I'll continue with saying in the Black community, especially, I think it's something that's really. I think it's changing, and I think it's so beautiful that that's happening. But I still believe, especially with maybe the generations before myself, I will think about my grandparents, for instance. Like we didn't talk to, like I never heard of a therapist for my family, right? We never, you don't go to a therapist to talk about your problems. What happens in this house stays in this house, right? That whole dynamic. And I think that I don't know if you've all experienced that, but I think that that's true still for a lot of families. They feel that being able to go to a therapist may be intrusive, or there may be DSS involvement, if there's something significant that's happening. So I do think that the trend is changing, but there is still a stigma in the Black community about mental health, what it means to seek mental health care as well as physical care, right? Because we see a doctor for headache or for physical symptoms, but not mental issues. I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
So what I think the reason why the stigma is that because when you go to a doctor, you're necessarily going because something's wrong. Therapist is not presented as we're here to help. It's kind of presented as a doctor. It's kind of presented as something's going on with me. I don't feel well. My head is hurting. I need medicine. I go to a doctor. If you think about people who go to therapy, they're usually because they need something from the therapist, as far as, like you mentioned, just conversation or understanding something. And there's a lot of positive that come out of it. But the stigma is that, especially in our cultural growing up and stuff, it's if you're going to a therapist, you have issues, you have mental problems, you're sick in the head. So that's why you go into those things. Is there a way that therapy can be presented as helpful, as far as some sort of marketing ploy or something to get people to stay off of that stigma?
That's a really good question. So I would say, especially for the practice that I work with, the way that we approach things is definitely from like a family systems approach. We kind of look at, okay, do you need support with, managing conflicts in your relationship, right? Do you need support with maybe um, coaching with your child, right? Learning different ways to connect with your child, or did you experience a trauma? Is something happening? So to make it more marketable, I think that's happening, and I think that's why more people are coming. But I don't know that unless you change the way you see therapy for yourself, that it will change the way it's seen just altogether. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, again, I think it's just we have to do a better way of marketing that to people. Because if you ask anybody, young or old, they think therapy, they think the couch, they think laying down, talking to somebody about your issues and your problems, and the therapist taking down notes. That's kind of the visual that everybody has. Even myself, I've been to therapy before, and it was definitely totally different. So for me, I understand. But prior to going to therapy, that was the same mindset. Coming from a Haitian household, we don't even really, for me per se, I'm the youngest out of three. We don't really talk about our feelings. Like something goes on, you just learn to resolve and deal with it yourself and keep moving. That's kind of how it was brought up, and that would affect you in the long run. To the point where when I got into college, I got into a real deep um, mental state where I would say that I was almost attempted to commit suicide. And that's because a lot was on my shoulders all at one time, and I never was really taught how to handle it, how to go through it. So I know that, I mean, I could talk about it a little bit more later on, but I just know that that's something that needs to change, the presentation of what therapy is for people and how it helps people versus you only go here when you have problems, when you're sick, or when something's wrong.
I'd like to add something else to what you said because I do think it's important. The marketing piece, I think, also comes by word of mouth, right? Because I think that we definitely learn about things by word of mouth still, even in the social media era. But I think it's important that we have those conversations just as transparently as you did just now with our loved ones, with our friends. Like, hey, that's definitely not what therapy is. It's so funny that you said that you had that experience, like you thought that therapy would be you laying on the couch, but that's totally that comes from the idea, like that Freud kind of did with therapy in the beginning, right? That's his thing. That's more psychoanalytic, and there are some theorists that still do it that way, but to actually go to therapy as it is right now, usually that's not what will happen. But I really believe firmly that having that open communication about what emotions we feel, but also what therapy is as a whole, will be something that changes the way that it's seen. So I guess in marketing through word of mouth. You're muted.
You're on mute, Root. Still on mute. There you go.
Okay. The host keeps on putting me on as I take myself off. He needs to go in timeout. So, two questions. One, can you? I think I've been hearing a lot about mental wellness as opposed to mental illness. If you can distinguish between the two, because I know sometimes I've even said that, like at work, I just need to take a mental health day. But I know that that's become a phrase that's become more popular in the lexicon. So if you can talk a little bit more about what mental wellness is and what that looks like. And part two is you said something to me that I think is like super important. You talked about at the age of 4 allowing your child to feel whatever it is they need to feel, especially he's a little boy, right? I say this all the time that like when a boy or a little child falls, the first thing they're told is get up be a man, brush it off, and not allowing them to feel those feelings. And then we wonder why they have issues communicating as adults. So if you could talk a little bit more about how to kind of from an early age, give children the tools to be able to feel what they need to feel so that they understand what it is, and that we as parents can just start to distinguish the two. I know that's a lot in 2 parts, so
I typed it down so I don't forget, because I still have mama brain, a little forgetful. But yeah, I got you. I think, and if I veer off, reel me back in, and I'll answer the question for you. But to talk about mental wellness, that is a packed question, and I hope that I answer it to your liking. So mental wellness is self-care. I mentioned earlier being aware of what you feel, having an understanding of what your emotions, look like. So for women, our emotions may change throughout the month because of changes in our hormones, right? And so being aware that, okay, I may feel a little angry, or I may be feeling like anxious, being very in tune with physically what you're feeling. And if I can go a little bit deeper into that, just being able to explain like maybe anxiety. So anxiety, and I actually have anxiety as well. Being able to manage that, right? What does that feel like? And maybe my heart may feel like it's racing. I sometimes have like, it's called, the medical term is pre-syncopal episodes, but it may feel like I'm going to faint. I may be feeling really exhausted or fatigued. Anxiety is just, it's a normal emotion, but when it misfires, or if I'm feeling anxious or overwhelmed, these are some symptoms that I might feel. And so I know, okay, my heart's racing, my hands are feeling a little sweaty. In normal instances, if there's nothing going on, that's normal, right? But if you're just randomly feeling that way, just being aware of what I'm feeling and why. And so I think in order to have mental wellness, being in tune with your body, knowing when something's off, being able to rest, being able to have proper nutrition, right? Because we discount those things, but it's important to eat well, to make sure that you're properly hydrated, right? Because you can get dehydrated, and you can, feel like you're going to pass out. You can see darkness. I don't know if you've ever experienced dehydration. Doesn't feel good, right? And so just being really aware of what am I feeling right now, and being able to make sure that I'm giving my body what I need, the adequate amount of it, so that I'm feeling well and that I'm able to do well. I also look at mental wellness, and I make this comparison sometimes. I think about human beings as like a reservoir. We have like, we're holding water, right? And if you do different things in life, whether you be parent, or you're employed, or you do all those things, or if you have a business, if you're a pastor, right? Because you have a lot on your plates, right? If you're the spouse of a pastor, if you do different things in life that requires a lot of you, and you're constantly pouring out of that reservoir into cups, which are other people, things, responsibilities, and you're constantly pouring, and you're not refilling that, you're depleting that reservoir, right? You're depleting yourself, and if you're not restoring that, that is not mental wellness. And it's not physical wellness either. So being very aware of, okay, how am I going to pour back into me? How am I going to do what makes me feel good? And self-care does not have to be expensive. For me, mental wellness looks like, if I had a really long day with the kids and my caseload was long this week, Saturday morning, I'm getting up and I'm going to the bookstore. That's my safe space. That is how I practice mental wellness. I get a cup of coffee and I just sit there for an hour or two and get my thoughts together. So I think mental wellness is very individual, and being able to understand what that looks like. If that's being able to devote an hour of prayer in the morning, or be able to, just do something where you're just quiet, when your mind's not racing. So I hope I answered that first part of your question. It's a very individual thing, but being able to understand what it is and what gives you back life, and how you benefit from it. And the second part, and I'll try to be quick because I feel like I'm talking a lot. I apologize. Allowing your children to feel emotions. Oh, that's so packed, right? So I am, I know you heard this earlier, that I'm from Jersey, and my parents are Black, as you can tell. And so I grew up in a traditional Black family, right? We didn't fall out. We didn't have tantrums. Very, I don't want to say stereotypical in that way, but we weren't allowed to express our emotions the way that I think the next generation is able to. But I think that's true in most Black families, that, you don't fall out. right? Like, what do you think this is? Like, don't fall out. You don't have, temper tantrums. You don't express your emotions in that way. And I'm learning because parenting does not come with a handbook. I mean, you figure it out, right? And hopefully you do it right so that your kids aren't spending their adulthood trying to recover from their childhood, right? But you try to do it right. And so allowing him to feel his emotions and understand. We do a lot of things like there's Daniel Tiger. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Some of you may have littles, but he talks. There's a episode where he talks about being angry, and I really do that with my son. I'm like, okay, you're angry. Let's talk about what you feel. Okay, is your heart racing? Okay, let's smell the roses and blow out the candles, which is deep breathing, right? Deep breathing is very useful if you ever feel anxious or overwhelmed. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth actually tells your brain, all right, she's not responding as if she was in an emergency, because that's what happens. We take quick, short breaths and our hearts race when we're in an emergency or an urgent situation. So when you do the opposite, it slows everything down and it actually slows your heart rate down. And so after he takes in some deep breaths and blows out the breath, I ask him like, okay, how are you feeling? Let's count. And I try to be very, very patient with him because I want him to understand, even at 4, what you're feeling and why. And this is the appropriate actions that you take. Now, is it perfect every time? Absolutely not, right? I'm not going to lie to you guys. But I want him to be aware that it's okay to express emotion. And I feel like in the Black community, we would benefit so much from allowing our children to understand what they're feeling and why, letting them explain to us what you said hurt my feelings, right? I don't think at least that was my experience. You didn't get to say you hurt my feelings. That's talking back, right? So I feel like it's healthy to have in a respectful, appropriate way, letting your kids do that. But I'm going to hush now. I hope I answered your questions.
If you feel so bad and you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4.
Ethan's favorite show.
Yeah, I think you were sitting there with your son watching that show, huh?
Listen,
yeah.
so my son
At what stage do we get to institutionalize some of us?
Himself, not for his son, okay? Markel,
I use it. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. As a grown man, I count to 4 when I need a moment. So it's funny. Quick little story before the next question. My son, there's a fan right here, and he had this painting that he wanted to stick to the fan. So he's 1. He's going to be 2 in May. So he has a piece of paper that he just drew, and he was trying to stick it to the fan while the fan is on. So every time he put it up and he let it go, the fan blew it. So he did it about 3 times, and then the 4th time he stood there and said, "Argh!" And then he tried it one more time. I had to really show him. But the reason why that's funny is because he watches a lot of Daniel Tiger. So that's exactly what happened on the show.
Yeah.
It really clicks with them.
No. So Shanta, I hear everything you've been saying. It's so I'm so happy to hear the emotions that you, as a therapist, that you're talking through your kids with. I grew up in a family where I have to say my mom was very emotional. She wasn't the typical Haitian where you weren't allowed to talk and certain things. My mom allowed you, I've seen her cry, we've cried. She allowed you to talk to her, which was very welcoming. But in the same token, we had that 24-hour rule of resiliency. So it's like something go through, you have 24 hours to get through it. So I've always been very cautious of that healthy balance. So at what point is it too weak to continue something? Or do you give yourself enough time to go through it? And I've done the same with my kids, except that we do allow our kids to process things a little bit more. But I've seen with my husband and I, with me, it's like, okay, you have 24 hours. Like, you should be over that, like done, over. And my husband would be like, everybody has their own term, Patty, just leave them be. But then I get very concerned as to, okay, when is that going to be like, is it an anxiety that's going to take 3-4 months? When is that healthy balance? Like, when as a parent, specifically when you have teenagers or kids in their 20s and you're watching something, when should you start being concerned where it's like, okay, it's just, that person just trying to express versus, okay, this is truly a concern. Like what is that healthy balance point, if there one?
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely a healthy balance, and I agree with you. I do think I don't like to put time frames on things, if I can avoid it. But I will say that if this emotion is so overwhelming and it's consuming, and you see the person change, and it's changing their social patterns, and it's changing the way they function at work and at school, and the way they engage with their family, then I'm like, okay, what's going on? Do we need to talk about this? Do you need to talk to someone else about it? I think the time frame. So if it lingers for like greater than 6 weeks, right? Like 4 to 6 weeks, it's like, okay, wait, what's going on? Because I do think it's just to be transparent. Just looking at teenagers, they tend to be kind of emotional because their hormonal changes happening, right? And so they kind of take things hard when something happens. Their first heartbreak, even though we hate to think our 13 or 14-year-old are dating, they probably are, right? That kitty dating, and they experienced their first heartbreak. We're at 16. That's heavy, right? That feels like grief. That's a loss. It sounds morbid, but that's kind of what happens. And so I think giving that space and time to recover from it is great. But if you see, okay, after this time, you're still kind of, stuck in that, or you're still feeling dark, or having them even maybe explain what they're feeling, what does it look like? With children especially, they're really great at, we use play therapy with kids. They're really great at, drawing pictures and saying, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And when you actually use the colors to describe, the darkness of what you're feeling, I think it does kind of help you understand what's going on. But I think just having that open communication, I hope I answered your question, open communication about what they're feeling and giving them a little bit of time. But if you're noticing that it's lingering longer than you think is normal and maybe a little excessive, then I would say to jump in.
No, you did. And before Rudy go, I just wanted to also mention, I think Markel had mentioned something about how do we bring awareness. And I think Shanta mentioned that there have been a lot of things. For me, I've noticed that there have been a lot of ways that companies have done a great job at bringing awareness. I think I've seen commercials, was it last year or maybe 2 years ago, of Queen Latifah bringing awareness to, I believe, Aetna. I'm not 100%, either Aetna or Cigna, bringing awareness to mental health. As well as when I go to my primary asks me, how's your mental? Now, this is something that 20 years ago they didn't used to ask. How's your mental? How's your stress level? So I guess they're doing a better job at asking you and bringing awareness to the other part of our body that's not necessarily physical, that's mental. So personally, and even with my friends, I've seen that what we went to 20 years ago, again, I don't know if it's maturity as well. The way I used to think about mental health 20 years ago is different. It could be a two-point thing. It could be the fact that I am definitely more mature, but we all seem to know more about it. And I have to say about 90% of my friends have seek help, including myself.
That's wonderful. And if I can piggyback off of what you said, I think it's really important. And I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this. So I do want to share this. When you do go to your primary care physician, there is something, especially here in Colombia, they're starting to do. I'm not sure about other states, but I'm pretty sure if they're doing it here, they're doing it other places. There is a screening that most times, especially if it's postpartum or if you're just going to see your primary for annual physicals, there's 2 screenings that they'll give you, and they're worded as, or it's called a GAD-7 or GAD-7, and then it's like a PHQ-9. And it's just simply a scale to see if you're feeling anxious or if you're feeling depressed. And based on your answers, they will sometimes even make referrals like, hey, I saw that, your numbers were a little, high on the high end, what's going on? Can I make this referral for you? So I do think there's easier access, but I do think to agree with you, easier access, it is, the conversation is different, but also having that conversation, letting people know it's not for crazy people. Like it's okay for us to seek therapy and to talk to someone. So I just wanted to add that in there and to piggyback off of what you said.
Okay. And another thing as well is I think the fear, I used to have the fear of, oh my God, this is going to be on my record and people are going to think that I'm crazy. So at least I grew up with that, where it's like, you don't go and tell a doctor that you're thinking anything that might be construed as mental health, because that's going to stay in your record and they're going to think you're crazy. I think for now, at least for me, I don't have that fear anymore, but I remember growing up with that fear.
The beautiful thing. Oh,
sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, see, for Black people, for African Americans, the reason why that's embedded in us is because we associate telling our doctors something like that means they're going to now prescribe us some sort of medication or pills that may have some sort of long-lasting effect on us and stuff like that. So that's the reason why I know for sure some people don't mention, like, they're like, how's your mental? Oh, I'm good. I'm straight. I ain't got no problems. They just try to push it out because they don't want to get put on some pill or something like that.
But it's so wonderful that you mentioned that. That is so true. And I really feel like it's changing slowly. It's getting there. But that is rooted in mistrust for the healthcare system. It's not just about mental health. It's also about physical health too. Like there is a rooted distrust with reason, right? Because of different things that has happened to us in history. But there's a deep rooted mistrust for the healthcare system, and that I think will change with conversations. But also, I think what makes it a little easier is also seeing someone across the table that looks like you. So you feel a little bit of a connection. You feel more trust. So I do think I think you opened with this, Pastor Monday, about it being important to see people that look like us in healthcare, because there is that trust that comes, but also being able to feel that connection. And I think that's so important. And I think that will help change the stigma. But there's so much work that has to be done just because of the history that we've had with healthcare systems, and not to mention what's happening now, and with the social injustices, right? That doesn't make it easier, and we're 10 times more as likely to feel overwhelmed, feel distressed, feel like we need someone to talk to, right? Feeling fatigue or compassion fatigue, right? Or feeling numbness. So there's so much that's so packed. But yes, I agree with both of you said.
Hi. Okay. So it's my turn now.
Welcome back, Woody.
Okay. So I would be remiss not to mention something else, that one of the reasons why there's a mistrust in the medical community is because doctors in the past have used what specifically women have said in those sessions, and then have alerted other authorities from mothers, right? Specifically in the Black community. That was done a lot in the 80s and the 90s during the so-called fight with the drug war. So I think that has a lot to do with it. The other thing is that we're also taught that you're supposed to keep whatever issue you have. Like, you don't put our business out in the street, right? Like, whatever's going on, nobody needs to know what's going on in your marriage, your home. That's not their business. So I think if we continue to have these conversations, and it's like letting them know that when you go to a therapist or your pastor or whomever, it's not that you're putting your business out, you're seeking another type of help, another type of relief, that then people will then start to understand what that is. And I think it goes back to what Markel was saying about what people think going to a therapist is, and kind of breaking that down. So I just wanted to say that. But I do have two questions. If we can talk one about the socioeconomics of it, because I think that's a big part of why people of color, or even poor people, tend not to seek therapy, because they think that it is a privilege of economics or affluence. So that's question one. So if we could talk about like the availability of it, and breaking down the misconception of you have to either be middle class, upper middle class, or rich to see a therapist. And two, if we could talk about the impact of social media and teenagers and mental health. And I've been seeing a lot of things that, because kids are oftentimes stay on social media, they're a little secluded. And so because they're not really interacting as much, like a human interaction, that parents can sometimes fail to see some of the signals that they are in mental distress. What are some of the things that we can look for as parents in the age of technology with their kids?
Do you want me to go first?
Okay.
Okay. I feel like I've been running my mouth, so please stop me if I'm talking too much, you guys. So the first one, like the socioeconomic implications that come with mental health, right? So what you said is perfect. I do think that there is a belief that you have to be middle class or rich to see a mental health professional, and that is not true at all. If you have insurance, there is definitely access through insurance, because most insurances will pay for a therapist if the pairs the therapist that you're seeking is paneled. Now, if they are not, they also provide you with therapists that are paneled with them. Now, there are also community programs that provide mental health services for free, or they provide them for a lower price. And it can be, I've seen prices as low as $10 to $20 literally. And so it's possible. And I will also say, because you go into the mental health profession, and I'm just speaking personally, I don't know about, I believe most other mental health professionals feel this way, but for myself personally, I didn't come into this to get rich. And so I know that I empathically care about people. Like, I really care about people and their wellness. And so if someone says, "Hey, Shanta, that's a little, I can't do that," I work with them, right? And I do things to make sure that people are taken care of, because I care. I give back to the community, right? But there are so many different resources. So here in Colombia, there are many resources here for people to see through colleges as well. So that's another good one. There are, I just remember that in colleges like USC, or even like Clemson here in Columbia, South Carolina, there are schools that provide mental health services through students that are training, or doctoral level students. They will provide services as well. And most of the time, it's little to no cost, and so you do not have to be rich or middle class to receive mental health care. And also, I will say this too: there is something called Better Health. There are so many. I mean, social media, especially because of COVID, I think, has provided so many ways for people to have access to mental health right in their home, mental health care, excuse me. And there's so many different. There's Better Health help. I can't talk today. There are quite a few outlets. I can't think of the other ones, but I'll get back to it. I'll look it up really quick, and then I'll provide it. And then there's also, if you're ever feeling like you want to harm yourself, or you're just feeling really overwhelmed, there are suicide hotlines that are national and local, and you can talk to someone, and they will help with getting you to kind of be distressed and not actually commit the act. And so it's so important to make sure that you tap into the resources that we have. You can literally look up the local people in your area, like you guys are in Philly, so looking up, the different programs there. But there's so much access to mental health care. I hope I answered your question well. The second question that you asked me about social media and mental health, that's also packed, right? Because social media is not just with children and teens, it has impacted adults, right? We compare ourselves. We see the fitness, gurus, and we see people, the we see we see the Instagram models, I think is what they're called, and we look like, oh wow, I don't look like that, or I want this to look this way. I don't know if the guys feel that way, but I definitely know with women, we compare ourselves a lot, and so I think
Monty looks at my pictures all the time. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
You're good. You're good. That's so funny. I think if you think about.
And no, can we talk about that? You need to keep your shirt on in these pictures. I'm sick of seeing it.
Oh, you guys are so funny. Just being able to think about, like, okay, if we feel that way as adults, maybe what our teens are going through, right? And so that comparison, I do think teens also go through the phase of trying to find themselves, and that whole identity piece that they go through at that age. And social media is so dangerous. It's wonderful, right? It's wonderful to have that connection with other people, but it can be so dangerous just because our children are susceptible to the different things that's out there, right? But I think it's important to keep just to keep tabs on your kids, and just as I mentioned to, is it Patty? Was it Patty? Okay. As I mentioned to her earlier, having that conversation and just being aware, being, paying attention to your kids when you think that they, when they don't know that you're paying attention, being mindful. Okay, they're maybe wearing a certain color a little bit, too much, or they seem to be, in their room in the dark a lot, or they seem really sad, or they don't seem like themselves, or their behavior has changed. What's going on? Maybe their grades are changing. What's going on silently that the child may not have communicated to you, but you see the difference. So I think just being very aware of your children and just the different things that comes with social media, because that's a really packed question. I hope I answered that well.
Okay.
You've answered every question perfectly. You're doing great. Don't worry about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
So I wanted to
Rudy
ask
tends
this
to
question.
ask
Can
five
we talk
questions
about the
in one, and
generational
basically
PTSD
differently.
in the Mokel?
Can we mute Cal? Cynthia, go.
Yeah, I'm about to mute him because I.
So, Shanta, can we talk about generational PTSD in the Black community? Um, did you hear me? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're on mute. She's on. I think Cynthia,
Oh,
do you like generational trauma?
Okay.
is that what you mean when you say I don't know if you couldn't hear me earlier. You said
Oh,
generational PTSD, or you mean like generational trauma?
generational trauma,
I
yeah.
think, yeah. If I can intervene or jump in a little bit, one of the things that I think, for us men, Black men, and we talk about this in the show a little bit before, but um, we are born into this society where we are exposed to a lot of hatred just because of the color of our skin. Um, I remember I used to ask myself when I was in high school, why is it that my friends, my male friends, are always so angry? And I never quite understood why that was happening. Even among each other, among us, we're supposed to be friends, but we can be friends for 1 minute and we can jump at each other's throat really hard the very next. And it took me years to finally understand that we stay angry because we were always being oppressed in so many ways, whether it's from the teacher who may means well, but because she or he represent another race, we feel it. And when we step into the street, I remember the first time I was exposed to the idea of racism was just asking someone for what time it was, and she quickly took off her watch and handed it to me as if I was gonna rob her. And I stood there and I didn't even know what to say or what to do because
Did
it
you take
was
a watch?
so. Huh?
Did
Oh,
you take?
she gave me the watch. No, I mean, I give it back, but I was standing there motionless. I couldn't even move because I'm only asking you for the time. Yeah, I was 6 foot tall or whatever, but be that as it may, I had no intention of doing any harm to the lady. You know what I mean? So we kind of grow up with a lot on our plates as a Black person. Um, Even between us Black men, we always feel like we have to show the other Black person that we are stronger, or we are more equipped than they are, because it's the survival of the fittest attitude all over again. So to go back to the PTSD, Cynthia is asking, we grew up with it. We never really have an outlet to express what's going on inside of us, and then we pass it down to our children. Markel gave us the example of toughen up. You're a boy or whatever. Toughen up. You have one day, and Patty mentioned you only have one day to get it over with and move on. That's what I think. That's what the question is alluding to.
But okay, before you go, Shanta, I would be remiss as the resident feminist on the show not to say that women also face those same
I was thinking the same. I was thinking
I
the same.
look.
Same issues,
So when
yeah.
Marty said for the fellas, I was like, oh, as soon as Rudy gets a second, she's gonna jump in.
I was thinking the same.
Once again, I was talking from a male's perspective. No offense to the ladies. I was going
Can
into
you
my
say black in general then?
Yeah,
Shanta. At some point, you need to come and intervene because there is such a thing as speaking from a man's perspective. I don't know what it's like to be a female.
no,
So when I'm speaking
okay,
and I'm giving you my personal experience, I'm only giving it from my perspective. However, you are entitled to give your own perspective if you dealt with it. Okay, this is
no,
what I feel.
no, okay, I understand that, but you said about black men as if black women also don't face those same anger, fears, and whatever in society. We just saw this week a young, and if Shanta, if you want to talk about this, a young black girl, 9 years old, had a mental health crisis, right? Calling for her father, and the police pepper sprayed her and put her in handcuffs. She's 9 years old. So, like my point is that black women and black kids have gone through that too. I just think
Correct.
there's a difference in how it manifests because in the gender roles. I'm sorry that we
Correct.
digress, Shanta, but
Correct.
you may continue. And like I said, I guess I'm the resident feminist.
Yes, you
On
are.
That's quite all right. So I think what you said is perfect. I think that generational PTSD or trauma is definitely passed on from generation to generation, right? It's one traumatic event that is, and the experience is not only experienced by that person, but that thought is passed on to their child, and then it continues, right? Um, and if I can answer this question simply, I think that it just comes down to being able to understand what's happening, being aware. Oh, I say this a lot, but awareness is what's necessary to see change, right?
Hmm.
Being aware that it's even happening and understanding what it looks like in your family for you to identify generational trauma.
Hmm.
What does it look like in my family, right? How do I deal with it after I identify it, and being able to heal from it, but also being able to talk about it so that it doesn't continue. And I also think, like, I know that a lot of people talk about like generational curses and things like that, but I also think about like generational habits and how we have to kind of unlearn some of the things that we've learned in our family of origin. And the family of origin is definitely just the family that we grew up in, right? And you think about the things that we learned, both good and bad, and the seeds that were planted, and some of them are traumatic experiences, some of them are positive, but if we don't deal with it and cope with it, those seeds grow. And if it's unresolved and we don't deal with those things, they continue to grow. But also, it manifests itself in our relationships, both intimate and relationships, as far as like friendships that are not intimate or more platonic. So I think just being aware of it, understanding that, okay, I'm dealing with this. I'm angry, not because of just situation, but it's triggering me because of how I've responded to other things in my past, or how I was allowed to respond. And also, I think which is a good thing, now that we're on this topic, is being able to understand that as an adult you can unlearn some of the things that you learned in your childhood, right? You have the opportunity to take different experiences and apply them if you feel it fits, and you can make your life experience what you need it to be. I know that sounds really simple, but it is. It's that
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
Trauma is difficult to heal,
Yeah.
right? But being aware of it and being able to say, okay, you know what, this is not healthy. I don't want my kids to experience this. If we can talk about, like, I'll just use spanking for example. Now, I'm not saying that that's like a bad thing. I'm not gonna tell people how to raise their kids, right? But if we think about the historic implications of spanking and what that's done to our parents and their parents, right? And then they did it to us. And then what happens when we start to, like that whole pattern, right? I feel like that's a trauma that happens in the Black community, pretty often, if I could be honest. But yeah, I hope I answered your question.
And Shanta, you are correct. Like, for instance, I'm very controlling. So controlling has helped me with a lot of success. However, controlling nonetheless. And I remember when I went to therapy and I'm talking, and the therapist is like, but this, and I'm like, but that, but this, but that. You don't realize sometimes, good or bad, what you have until somebody pointed out. And of course, because you are the way you are, you go to bat to fight for it because that's what you know until somebody else bring that different perspective. And what I've told some of my friends that haven't gone to therapy is that even when everything is going well, sometimes it's good to touch base with someone. And that's part of that mental wellness because sometimes you're so into what you know how to do, you don't know that the way you do it can be better until somebody else bring it to your attention. And that's one thing that I've seen with myself because I'm debating with the therapist that I'm supposed to be listening to. So you have to take a step back and say, you know what? I'm here for a reason and I need to listen. Again, going back to what you said about having that seed in the way you are implanted in you. So you have to be able to be open to listen and hear a different perspective from a professional.
I think I think we all have done that in therapy if we ever been to. But I want to shift the topic. It would not, if we don't mention it, we will not be talking about mental health like suicide. I've have dear people in my life that have successfully commit suicide, and I have recently a family member who tried, and she tried several times, and I think this time around it felt different. The reason it felt different because I carry the burden as if I don't know, maybe my connection with her or maybe my caseload as well, because it's very true, it's heavy. And I carry the pain with me. And I was in a deep place where I'm like, okay, professionally, I cannot help her because of our relationship. I have people on my caseload I'm helping, but this is my family. This is somebody whom I love dearly, and I cannot help her. I know at some point, work as a social worker, you cannot save anyone, and because you cannot save, you have I mean, I'm not sure for anyone, but for me, sometimes when it comes to family members, someone you love dearly, you have that savior mentality that, oh my gosh, I want to save you. I want to tell you, you have to do this, you have to do that. But suicide, I want you to touch base, meaning a lot of people think when when somebody is in a despair moment, and if you mention, oh, are you feeling sad, are you feeling suicidal, a lot of people think you're putting idea into their head. Okay, by addressing it or by mentioning it, they are going to do it. So now my question is to you, what signs can what are the signs, and what can you, besides the hotline, what can you do as a family, when it comes to a family member or friend, besides the hotline, what can you do to help before, they get to that point, or even, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And before I answer your question, I want to touch on something. I think especially this year, because of the implications of COVID, because of just the things that have gone on this year, and last year, right? Because the year is pretty new.
Yeah.
It's pretty new. But there has been so much to happen, right? People have lost jobs. There are people that are hungry, and it seems like the answer for some people, right? They're so overwhelmed they just can't handle it. And I think that if we're honest, and I'm a numbers person, and while you were talking, I wanted to get the exact numbers, but according to the statistics, and you can look this up, it's NIMH, which is the National Institute of Mental Health, and in 2008 there were over 48,000 people that completed suicide.
Wow. 2008?
2018.
18.
Wow. The 10th lead, and I'm not good at remembering numbers, so I had to go look it up. But it's the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. So that means that there's something going on, right? And having that conversation, I actually just had a dear friend. I learned of a dear friend that also completed suicide, and I think I felt like you, Cynthia. I felt like, wow, especially as a therapist, what could I literally sat in my car and blue cried because I was just like, what could I have done to reach out and to make sure that that person was okay, right? But I think to answer your question, I think it's important to know that um, being aware of the person's patterns, the people that are close to you will notice the changes. Like, is the person doing things to finish business, right? Are they writing wills? Are they, and they're not terminally ill? Are they, and you should have a will. I don't mean that like you shouldn't have one, but are they just all of a sudden, changing things? Are they paying off stuff? Are they giving away things? Like, are they doing things that characteristically is out of their normal behavior, right? Being very, because sometimes people won't say it, but you can just tell by the changes in their behavior. But I think it's important, Cynthia. I'm so glad that you asked that question. If I mention, are you feeling sad? Are you okay? Will that make the person want to? And I don't think that plants the idea to commit suicide at all. I don't think so. I think that if you are in fear that your loved one or your friend is planning to harm themselves, I would ask, hey, are you okay? Are you feeling like you want to harm yourself? If they have a history of it, right? Because also know if someone writes a suicide note that does not have an expiration date on it, right? And so if authorities get a hold of that information, they're going to always think that this person was planning this, right? And so it doesn't have an expiration date. And so I think that if the person has is usually sad or usually feeling depressed. I mean, doing check-ins to see if they're okay, asking those questions that may be difficult. As the loved one, hey, do you need me to come sit with you? Or I'm gonna come sit with you, or I'm gonna talk to you until you're feeling better. Hey, let's get someone else on the line. Maybe even call the national suicide prevention line with them. And say, hey, I'll sit on the phone with you. I not to divulge too much information, but I've had a close friend where I had to okay, let's go walk to where we need to go, right? We didn't have a car yet, but let's get to where we need to go because I want you to be okay, right? All seriousness, I like to crack jokes, and this is a serious matter, but being honest, hey, listen, I want you to be okay. I care if something happens to you. Being vulnerable in that space, and I think people just want to know someone cares about them because I think that's another thing, right? You may feel alone, and if you know that, hey, if I hurt myself, you would care or you would, feel sad. I think that may, in some instances, make the person think, okay, you know what, I have someone in my side. I have an ally, but I just think being there for the person, if nothing else, but also making sure that once they are okay, that you do say, hey, listen, I think you need to talk to somebody. I think it's important. I want you here, right? Your life matters to me. Let's get someone on the line. I'll go with you. I've had people come and sit in therapy sessions with their loved one, and it's okay as long as they sign off on it. Okay, like you can do that. So I hope that answers your question in a nutshell. I didn't mean to ramble.
No, you're fine. Thank you. It did.
Can I ask you? I noticed that you said completed suicide as opposed to committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
What's the distinction between that type of language?
So I say completed because they carried the act out. I don't really like to say committed. It just sounds, and this is just personal. I don't know too many people that use have a distinguished change between it. But I say completed because the person carried it out, and I don't want them to seem. I feel like it has negative connotations attached to it. So that's another reason why I say it that way.
So it's committed and completed used interchangeably, or they're the same? Or to me, I took committed suicide could be where you actually succeed or not succeed. Completed, actually you succeeded. That's how I read it. Is that how it's supposed to be?
Attempted suicide is when you did not complete. You tried, but completed is when you actually. Now I've heard people say committed or completed, and I feel like it is interchangeable, but I prefer completed.
Yeah, I like to share my story a little bit about this topic because I actually attempted suicide, and a lot of people aren't familiar with this. Even my family members, who when we had our meeting, was like the first time they've actually heard of it. And I went to, this happened when I was in college, and I went to an advantaged university. So, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you can be an individual who, like myself, grew up religious and was rooted in God and in church, and these thoughts and things like that can still happen. A lot of times people think because you're religious, you don't necessarily have these life pressures because all you're supposed to do is just pray about it and, God will take care of it. but you still have life situations that will cause you to think to do harm to yourself or something of that sort. So when Cynthia was talking about friends and stuff like that, and I think Shante said it best, like just be there for them in any capacity possible is the best thing that you can do to help them. There's not anything you can do technically to solve it. It's a self thing, in my opinion. I'm not a therapist, nothing. It's a self thing that has to get them over the hump. And for me, my story comes out at the school that I was at. They have what's called stall news, which is like a printed out newsletter that they put in the bathroom stalls weekly as you're using the restroom, brushing your teeth. Is all over the bathroom. You can go through. There's a weekly Bible verse and things that's going on around the campus. I was at a time where it's weird because people wouldn't see Kels and think that's something that he would do. And that's another part. You always think that it's the person who's sad and depressed or whatever the case may be. But then something happens to someone who you thought was like myself, happy go lucky, joking all the time when I'm around other people. I was playing basketball, which is my passion. So it was like, why would a thought like that enter my mind? But deep inside, I was going through a lot of stuff. I had on again, off again relationship problems with this one person, long story. I had issues with my family. Family member was kind of split apart where I'm used to my nucleus being close by and together. But since I decided to go away for college, it affected me in that sense. Stress from school bills and being in debt was affecting me. Then my grades, I wasn't getting the grades that I needed to get certain funds to help pay for school. That was affecting me. My mother's health was affecting me. Me not being next to my mom as she's going through these health issues was bothering me. I started to think, what would happen if I wasn't there? I started having friendship issues with certain people who I thought were long-term friends of mine. So we start beefing and having problems. It just got to the point where I was just like, man, if Kels wasn't around, all of these problems wouldn't exist anymore. You see what I'm saying? And at the time I was in the dorm, I was living on the fourth floor of a 5-story dormitory. I went to the window, opened the window up, kicked the screen out. I was literally sitting there looking, getting ready to fall down. And this is where the story kind of sounds funny, but it's the truth. It's what really happened. All of a sudden, I had some sort of bowel movement or something of that sort. I needed to use the bathroom right then and now. And I know people was like, well, if you just did it, the bathroom wouldn't have been a problem. But for some reason, something stopped me, and it was the bowel movement. I ran to the bathroom down the hall. I sat in the toilet. I'm not very emotional, so I'm not crying or nothing like that. But I'm emotional. If you know me, you can see that. And then I look up at the stall news that's in the bathroom, and the first thing that catches my attention is the Bible verse. And the Bible verse is Deuteronomy 31, verse 6. It says, be strong and courageous. Do not fear, be terrified of them, for the Lord thy God is with you, and he would never leave you nor forsake you. And that verse not only saved my life, and this is the reason why I have it tatted on me as well, is kind of how I see obstacles that come in my way now. And in the verse, he says, do not fear, be terrified of them. I put them as anything. It could be a challenge, which I don't really like to say the word problem anymore. I now say the word challenge because I work to overcome that challenge. I work to succeed in whatever it is that I'm doing. So I just have a lot of challenges that present themselves in life. It can be relationship issues. My wife, if we have a problem, we have a challenge that we're going through or something of that sort, that them situation could be anything. And to put the mindset of do not fear, be terrified of it, and God is with you and he'll never leave you alone, which is what I needed to know at that time. Whether I felt alone from everybody else, I just know that God was with me. So I know the I want to say hotline, but the lifeline is going down at the bottom, and the chat is open. Web chat always available for people in there. I believe they're 24/7 as well. I think it's also, and Pastor D can probably add more to this, it's also very important to be grounded in something. For me, it was my religion. I know you expressed it before, and Cynthia, I want to say to you and your friends' situation and stuff, just be there for them. Have them be grounded into something that can help them come over this as much as possible. And then being religious, just continue to pray for them. That's the best thing that I can say.
That's so good. And I just wanted to say too that I do think being grounded helps. And I think that that is something that I think will carry us further than sometimes we understand. Even with when we feel anxious. I mean, you were transparent and shared about your story, but I think that we feel it in different moments. Like I may not have experienced having suicidal ideation, is what we will call it. Um, but I did, after having my daughter, who's 2, I did experience postpartum depression, and
Hmm.
so dark, and it was difficult for me to even pull. And I have the training to pull myself out, right? The coping skills, but it was so difficult for me to pull myself out of that. And so I think it's important to have someone in your side on your side and have an ally. And if I could step back also for 1 second, Rudy, you asked about the language that I used. And as Kels was talking, I was thinking, like, it also, in my mind, I don't know if anyone else thinks about it this way, but to say committed suicide also looks like the person is like a criminal, right? Like of course we don't want them to harm themselves, but it criminalizes that person in a sense. So that's what I meant earlier too when I was talking about the negative connotation. But I think that just having an ally, someone in your corner, means all of the world. It makes the difference. I just wanted to add
Yeah,
that tidbit in
yeah. I think language is important, and I
there.
think how we communicate and how we describe things is extremely important. And as we evolve as human beings, knowing the right adjectives or words to use. So that's why I wanted to know why that was. I'm like one of those people that, like, I hear something and I want to know why it's used so that I can go forward and make sure that I'm using the right type of language. Um, so I appreciate you saying that. And you're right, there is this like negative, almost criminalized connotation to it. I mean, I grew up Catholic, and I remember hearing that, like, if you committed suicide, you wouldn't go to heaven, right?
Hmm.
Like it was like a bad stigma, and opposed to giving that person empathy, because I always believe that, like, if you are at that place, it means that you've given up. And so to think that the church has also given up on you is like must be hard as well. So I think us as Christians or believers, we can do a lot um, to help um, be there for people and understanding that it is an illness as well, right? Like if somebody has heart disease, we don't shun them. We don't say that, well, you have heart disease, you're not going to have it. So if it's a mental health crisis, we should have that same empathy and understanding that they're at like a point in their life that they've completely given up.
Yeah, yeah. And I also wanted to say, first of all, I wanted to say to Markel that I'm proud of you for being able to articulate um, exactly what was going on in your life at that particular time. I think part of the healing is to be able to talk about it and say, okay, listen, this is what I've done, this is what was going on with me, and kind of understand what was happening and what may have caused you to even go that far. But I also feel that that's still just one of the steps of many steps. Um, it's I always look at when we go through things, I always say, listen, we are all on a journey, and at that particular time in your journey, whatever that was going on caused you to feel the way that you felt, but that is not who you are. That's just how you felt at that particular time. But I also hear from just listening to you the importance of and I know we all belong to a family that we have people that we trust and so forth, but there are times you may feel that you are all alone. Again, it's just a feeling. And Shanta, you may even talk about that if you wish. Feelings come and goes. It's just at that particular time what you are feeling right now. It's like this is it. This is all there is, but it's just a feeling, and it will disappear eventually. Sometimes it may require medication. Sometimes it may require that you do speak to someone and you do um, um, meet with your pastor if they are qualified to sit with you and pray with you and help you out. Listen, I'm saying this to say just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you don't experience what Markel talk about. Now, this is someone who was at a school full of Christians. This is a university full of Christians, and he was about to commit suicide. And Markel, if my memory serves me right, there was a suicide that took place at Andrews.
Yeah, there
And
was.
guess what? It was at the seminary. Now,
Hmm.
this is pastors. Now, people who are studying to become pastors, and they reach a point where they feel that say this is what they have to do, and they commit suicide. Just to show you again that we are none of us are exempt to this. It's a struggle that we all have to learn how to maneuver, and you don't need to allow the stigma that is associated with either mental illness prevent you from seeking the help that you need, whether it's from your pastor or whether it's from a therapist like Shanta. Or I remember growing up, I used to hear this terminology, it takes a village. You have to learn to create your own village. What I mean by that is we all need, and it's unfortunate, even with social media right now, with everything that's available to us, we are still alone. I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking just for myself. I feel that there was a time I was more connected before social media. I really felt that I was more connected. Now you have a lot of people who will just go and like something you put on, but they don't know you. They don't care to know about you, what's really going on with you. So you need to create your own village. Your village doesn't need to be a lot of people, but it needs to have some people that can can be there for you and talk to you and know that they have your back. And listen, I appreciate as much as you were being vulnerable to share this experience with us. And I feel that part of me feels like, man, Monday, where were you? I was at Andrews at that time, but maybe going through my own things, not thinking about you, and this is what you were going through. So I apologize to you as well as my brother. I love you. If I was not there for you when you really needed that person to be there for you as well.
So since we're just going to talk about it, let's talk about it. You were there for me. There's been times that I've come over to your house, like you said, you were at Andrews, but the person that I've always been and how I've been raised and how I grew up, I never really even opened up about my own stuff to even you. You see what I'm saying? And I'm much different now, and I give a lot of praise to my wife because she helped me tap into this. I hate to say emotional side, but emotional side, right? Where it's okay to talk about this. It's all right to talk about that. I never had that before. You know what I'm saying? Monty, you know now, I'll call you when I have any type of questions or feelings or thoughts. I have another best friend of mine who actually went to Andrews. He's a pastor as well. I call him 24/7, any time of day. He told me just give him a call. And that's part of the village thing that you're talking about. But during that time, believe it or not, bro, I know you was going through your own stuff because you was able to share your stuff with me, but I wasn't in that position to share my stuff with you. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So it's like I took what was going on with your life and stuff and even maybe shared words of encouragement to try to help you get through it, but I just put it onto my shoulder. But I never took off my shoulder what was going on to put it onto you. I was just
Mhm.
known as the one to just carry everything because that's how I always saw it through
Mhm.
not just my household, but other households growing up in the area that I grew up in. It was just pick up your load and keep moving with what you got going on.
Mhm.
But I
Um,
appreciate you, bro. I love you, man.
I think part of this right here is part of the healing. Um, 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 and and not realizing how impactful um, like one thing can be. So I'm sorry, I just got distracted because my sister just texted me and was like, "You should tell them how you just apologized to me for something." so she, so she found out. I was like, "What is happening?" But since she brought it up.
Tell Jesse I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Well, at least she's watching. But
Mhm.
she was, I guess it was like, it was a long time ago. And she was going through something. And I'm a very different person now than I was back then, right? And so, and it was during her pregnancy, and I didn't realize that what I said had hurt her at the time because I was more concerned about my parents and not concerned about her as my younger sister. And so, most recently, I had to tell her I apologize, and she's held that in for a really long time, right? And so, I had to apologize to her to be like, I didn't realize, and I'm sorry that that's how that I'm not even sorry that's how you felt. I'm sorry for my lack of empathy and like how callous it was. And I think that's part of the healing process, right? I think people think that therapy, and maybe Mondi, I also know that you're a therapist, so I want to and ask you a question. I think people think that it's just one session and you're good. It's an ongoing thing, right? Because the more you sit, the more you discover, the more you have to it's like an onion. You keep finding another layer and layer and layer of things. So it would be great if we can talk about that. It's an ongoing treatment, right? That it's not a one-time thing, because it's also not a one-time fix. It's not like you go to therapy once and it's boom, you're fixed. Because I bet you, Cal's, like, you've been through more than one session to kind of still deal with it. But Mondi, I want to know about you, about being a pastor and a therapist, and where that crossroads is, right? Like, how does understanding, or have a better understanding of what mental illness and mental health is, helped you in your ministry and also your counseling to whomever is coming to you? You're on mute.
Apologize. It was a struggle at the beginning because I used to associate mental illness with sin, or associate mental illness with an evil spirit. And so, when you sit across someone and they are divulging what's going on with them, and then you tell them, well, you know what, we're gonna have to read certain psalms and do certain thing and chase the spirit out of you. It's not. And then when you go back and read the Bible and read Jesus, that's not what he did. He didn't say that. He didn't deal with people like that. So I had to relearn a lot of things that was taught to me and re-understand them through another needle, through the eyes of Jesus, and understand that as I deal with the woman at the well, there's a conversation I'm going to have with her that's going to be different to the blind man who comes and all he needed was for me to touch him so he can be healed. So people come to you with different expectations as well. You might sit across someone who's very spiritual. So if they are very spiritual, then the conversation becomes a very spiritual, deeply rooted conversation. When we talk about, it's still considered an illness, but we talk about the healing process from a spiritual perspective. You know, taking the time to spend time reading the word and carve time out of your life to spend time with God and read certain Bible texts and speak certain things into existence, into your life. Just that exercise alone does something to your mental psyche. And even with that, again, you mentioned how it's a process. There's still other steps that's required. Another one, maybe make sure that you do have a support team as well. It's not just okay, it's just you and God on that journey. No, God said it's not good for men to be alone. There's a reason why he say that. So have that support team around you, people who can encourage you. It could be your church members, but certain church members that you trust who can be there for you and encourage you and be the support that you need. And at some point, if you need medication, I'm going to send you to a therapist who can prescribe you medications. I think again, it goes back to where you are. When we sit there and some people, or maybe all they need is cognitive behavior therapy, and they'll be good. For some people, they are like, I look at Pat, for example. She will be like, listen, give me solution focus. Time is an issue. I got things to do. I don't want to sit there and talk about my feelings. It depends. It varies from person to person. And so you have to evaluate what's happening and then see the degree of the difficulties of what's happening with them, and decide together what's the best route for them. Some people don't want to do medications. They tell you from the get-go, I'm not taking any pills. I don't want to take any medication. So you're gonna have to sit there. Part is one. There you go. I know it.
Yeah. I remember I went to a psychologist one time, and I'm sitting in the office, and everyone that comes out with a script. I was like, hell no. I walked into I was like, no. So then I went back and I went to see the psychologist. Literally every single person walked out with a script. Like, nope, went in my car. Like, no, I want to talk to someone. I don't necessarily, first of all, I have the kind of body where anytime you put something in it, I'm sleepy anyway. So I'm like, no. And believe it or not, I'm in the pharmaceutical field, and I'm like, no, that's not for me. But going back to you, Wendy, I do have a question for Shanta. Shanta, is it Shanta or Shanta?
It's Shanta, but I'm not a stickler.
Shanta, I like that. So nowadays, you're seeing where when you're looking for primary care, you literally can find A to Z about that primary care. How should people look for a psychologist? What are some of the traits that you need to look for? Like, to be honest with you, I picked my psychologist primarily because she was African American, and that was something that I wanted to make sure that my psychologist was somebody that looked like me. But it wasn't necessarily because I went through a list and checked it off. And to be honest with you, even if I did, I wouldn't know what to look for. So granted, it worked well. Awesome. But I would like to educate myself and people out there that are looking for a psychologist.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful question. And I would say this is applicable to any healthcare professional. And this is just my take on it. And this is how I look for people that I need help from. So there are different resources like Psychology Today, which I'm actually on. That is a good resource to figure out what that therapist is certified in, what their specialty is, how long they've been practicing, what they look like, because usually they provide a picture. I will say that just inherently humans, we're a little, I won't say biased, but we prefer and we feel safer with people that look like us, right? So being aware that demographic wise, what is my preference? Do I prefer a woman, right? Do I prefer a male because I'm a man, right? Do I prefer, this person to be married if I'm seeking couples therapy? Do I prefer someone, just being transparent, that has dealt with depression and knows not just from a clinical perspective, but personally what it feels like to go through that, right? So I think first being able to understand if you have preferences and what that is, and being true to it, because I feel like that's fair. But also if you decide that when you pick a person and you meet them, this is not for me, you are absolutely allowed to change and not seek therapy with that person anymore. You're not tied to that person just because you go. So I just think going in there with an open understanding of what you're looking for, and if the person doesn't meet that need, being okay and advocating for yourself and saying this is not okay. I didn't feel comfortable with this. I'm gonna get someone else. So yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I wanted to touch base with what you said earlier, Shanta. When you had your your daughter, you had postpartum, and it's happening a lot in the Black community. But I'm assuming every race experience postpartum, and even for me with both kids. Usually, when you have your first and you experience postpartum, usually, even if you have a second child, even with pregnancy, it will reoccur. And I'm glad he's not on Facebook, so I can say that. I remember my dad called me and he said, I heard you had that crazy person, was it sickness? And I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, when, after you have a baby, you go crazy. And I said, no, who told you that? And it's sad to hear that, because a lot of people, you hear a lot of people go through it, and there's some degree of it that it's really bad. Like for me, I knew I want to say the level I had it. I knew my body. I knew I didn't needed medication. I knew I needed to talk to someone to gather my thoughts, and I needed to time away from the baby. But some people really need medication, and some people need a second person besides their spouse to live in with them to have 24-hour care. You know, I know we all know the story of Andrea Yates, where she drowned all her children because her postpartum depression was so great, and she kept having baby but with no help. So I don't want people to think, oh, it's just postpartum, it's no big deal. Your thought is telling you to harm that baby, but you know you don't want to do it. So sometimes the thought are so greater that it overpower your will not to do it. So if anybody who's listening who's going through that, seek help. And if medication is the need, yes, go through medication. And there's also, if medication is no longer needed, there's medication management to stop you from taking medication instead of just automatically stop yourself. Because when you're taking psychotropic medication, when you stop it yourself, there's some negative, how you call it, reaction to your body, because you know, you have to go through different dosage before it happen. But I'm so glad we're talking about this topic. Mental health is very dear to my heart. That's why I'm in the field. Like you said, you know, every day I'm quitting because, you know, you overwork, underpay. Every day I'm quitting, but I'm here. I've been doing it for so long, but I love it. But I'm glad a lot of celebrity are putting light to it with mental health. And I think with COVID, there's a lot of help online where people can go and seek help. So I hope, you know, this topic continue and people really seek help, because help is out there.
But Cynthia, hold on, Patty, this is airing on Facebook, so I'm sorry.
No, he's not on Facebook. My dad is not on Facebook. And no, I know, that's what I said. He's not on Facebook. I can say that.
To piggyback, and I know we're on top.
Go ahead and tell him.
We're on top of the hour, and to piggyback is also menopause. Also, it's an area that we don't touch. But I'll tell you, I'm going through it myself. The emotional roller coaster because of the low estrogen. It really can ravages. There's a lot of depression that's associated with that. So again, seek help. Talk to your doctor, talk whoever you feel comfortable with. But unfortunately, these are some of the things that our body goes through, for better or worse. And don't ignore the signs.
I would just like to, sorry, real quick, Ruth. I would just like to throw this out there, as I know you guys are busy in your fields and your life and things of that sort. But I think this episode can reach a lot of people. And I know that I saw a comment of someone saying, what do you do if you don't know how to reach out to somebody, don't know what to say? And I know we've been throwing some things out there, but I know my brother. I've known Cynthia for years, and I've just met you, Shanta, and I feel comfortable just having this conversation. And maybe they see the comfort level based off of you being funny and joking at the same time. You're not like a stuck up person or whatever like that. I would just suggest, Mons, if you guys are willing to put your Instagrams or an email, or there you go, you could contact us at Gmail or so with a name and phone number if you're looking for someone to talk to. I'm not that person. I've been told I give blunt advice, and some people like it, some people don't. I see you, Rudy, hating. But if you want to talk, hey, Kels, talk to me about your time of what you were going through, your thoughts or whatever. Reach out to us, say who you're looking for, and we'll get back in contact with you. I just think it's a great opportunity for us to say that now.
I do have a question. I know we're supposed to end.
I had a question first.
Go ahead, and then I'll talk.
Do we not have a show structure anymore because we have a guest? I just want to know. Okay, fine. I have a question from the audience. Can postpartum lead to anxiety later on?
Yes. So I try to answer this real quick, because I know that I'm sure on time, but actually depression and anxiety are kind of, if you look at it as two faces on the opposite end of a coin. So one may be presented, but the other one is present, and they kind of travel together as siblings. So yes, definitely, if you experience postpartum depression during pregnancy, or after pregnancy, yes, you may experience anxiousness as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So going back to what Kels just said, so what are some of the liability conscious things that we need to know? Like, you know how he said to reach out, and unfortunately, one of the things specifically in the U.S. is as much of a good thing you want to do, you cannot stop but thinking of some of the liability sometimes of doing certain things. At least for me, that's always in the back of my mind because we've seen where you're trying to do a good thing and it backfires because you have attorneys for anything and everything. So if someone reach out to you and it seems like they're having some issues, I mean, if you're not the right person, you can always hit them up with the hotline and stuff like that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. I guess that's what we are saying. We have been providing um, the different numbers or different places that they can call. But this is, I think, what Marco was saying is if after listening to the program and you feel like, you know what, let me use this opportunity to speak to someone, we are here. Um, and we may not be the answer to the solution, we may not be the solution to your problem, but we can definitely lead you to someone else. We can connect you to another resource, someone that we know in your local area that will be able to help you. And again, at the end of the day, that's what we are here for, family. We are here to help one another. I may not know how, but someone else might. I may not know how to help you with your particular problem, but I'm sure someone else has. And at the end of the day, I'm also a pastor. If you need to call and you say, Pastor, I just want you to pray with me. I'm
Right.
gonna do that. We don't need to worry about liability. Listen, I'm gonna
Yeah.
go to court and say, yes, I did. I pray with him. So, um, listen, for everything, there's a time and a season, and I want to take this moment to say how much we appreciate having. I know you don't want us to call you doctor, so having Shanta Jerideau with us, you have been such a great help in so many ways. You provided a lot of not only resources to us, but also answered many of the questions that we really wanted an answer to. If someone were to wanted to reach you, maybe in your area of expertise or where you are, how can they do that?
So a really easy way to find me, I mentioned it earlier, is on Psychology Today. If you just put in my name, Shanta Jerideau, you can actually find all of my contact information and the practice that I work with which is called Palmer Counseling and Consulting, which is here in Columbia, South Carolina. It has my email as well. As soon as you hit email, whatever you send to me comes directly to me through my personal email. And once I respond, it'll come back from my email address. That's the quickest way to get to me. But also, and just to spell my name for those that you see it on the screen, never mind. But but also for those of you that may not remember Psychology Today, you can also use the email link that Pastor D provided, and he can reach out to me if that's okay with him and make any.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so, in closing, again, thank you, Shanta. Thank you so much, and especially to those of you who are watching the show, and your questions and your participation. We want to say thank you as well. And listen, if you have been blessed by this program, we are inviting you to not only watch it but also share it. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family, and be that person. You know, we all need somebody. Okay, so be that person for that somebody who's looking for someone. Before you go, I just want to remind you of the word of God. When we talk about mental illness, the Bible also talks to us. David, I believe David suffered from mental illness, but we'll leave that for another story. But David had enough in him to say, Lord, create in me a clean heart and renew a steadfast spirit within
Yes.
me. And I just pray that whatever you are going through, you can also call out to God in your time of needs. And the Bible promises us when we call out to Him that He is not that far, He is near, and He will answer questions. So, Shanta, we thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we want to let you know that you are now officially a member of the Remedy family.
Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when we do have that trip that Pat is going
To
to pay for,
Hawaii.
you will
That's what I was
definitely
gonna
be
say.
invited. Yes, Moody.
I was gonna say when we go to Hawaii, she's definitely coming.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's pray together, family. Lord, we just want to say thank you. We ask that you will continue to bless Shanta and her family and the member of the Remedy. We ask, Lord, that you will reach out to those who are suffering from mental illness, Father God, that you will help them to find the person that they can trust, find the therapist that they can talk to, find a pastor that they can talk to, Lord. Help us, Father God, to remember that we were not created to live alone, but we were created to be connected with one another. Bless us as we move forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you again. Thank you so much. And we love you, family, and we will see you next week for another episode here on The Remedy.